Is James Harden using the Houston Rockets as leverage? So here is ESPN's Brian Windhorst on with the PTI guys yesterday, and listen to the question that Tony Kornheiser asked the ESPN NBA insider.
Do you take seriously that he wants to return to Houston, or is he using this as leverage, against the 76ers?
Exactly the question that most of the NBA is asking. The 76ers have not shown an appetite to pay Harden the max. That's why they asked him to take a pay cut last year. The Rockets have the cap space. Do they do it? There's been a very hard rumor out there in the NBA about Harden's intent to go back to Houston, and it makes you wonder if it's being sold a little bit too hard. And that's certainly something that people are considering. I guess we're going to wait and find out. But again, just like with Kyrie, the Sixers are not really motivated to pay him that max salary if they don't think anybody else is going to do it.
So here's my question. Wasn't Windhorst the same guy who had the report the other day that there's a, quote, appetite from people around the league to give Harden the max? And now, a couple of days later, he's saying there doesn't seem to be an appetite for James Harden to get the max.
Yeah, fitting that it's Windhorst doing all of this appetite talking, huh?
Well,
yes, that is a fat joke for those keeping score at home. That absolutely is.
Also, he's the only one I've seen dropping the appetite thing. Now, I don't think Wendy's wrong here. Like, if just because the Sixers don't want to pay him, that doesn't mean some other team wouldn't pay him that.
That's fair. And also, to be fair to Wendy, he does look like he's lost some weight in this cut. I'm looking at the video here. Fat. He looks pretty good.
Yeah. You're right.
Maybe he had some snails with Wembanyama in his 70 seconds of screen time with him during the lottery.
All-time great interview there. I think Windhorst got duped by James Harden and James Harden's representation. I don't think there was ever an appetite for James Harden to get a 4-year, $200 million deal. I don't think any team out there wants to give James Harden that type of contract. I think that was Harden and his agent trying to create some buzz for him. And I think Windhorst, since then, has done some research, and he's talked to teams around the league, and he's realized that, that wasn't the case. There wasn't that desire for teams to be paying James Harden max money this offseason. So I think that's kind of why you've had that 180 from Wendy over the last 7 or so days.
I don't believe anybody wants to open the negotiation with maxing out Harden, but I do believe there'd be a couple of teams that'd be willing to eventually land on the max to get them James Harden. It doesn't seem like the 76ers are one of them. And even if you were willing to go to that level, if you were Philadelphia, you already got this guy to take a pay cut and take less money than he was worth or less money than he could have earned once. Why would you ever negotiate until it was the absolute necessity of talking about maxing him out? Like, you already got him on a deal once. Why wouldn't you absolutely try to get him on a deal a second time?
After another year of wear and tear and after another playoff elimination game disaster. Yeah. Right? Like, why would this be the time Philadelphia wants to pay James Harden max money when they didn't want to do that before this past year went down?
So Windhorst said there's an appetite around the league for someone to give Harden a max. Is that the Rockets? Are the Rockets really going to be that team that's going to give James Harden $200 million for 4 years?
Again, I feel like every team that's going down the Harden path knows if it comes to the max deal conversation, we either need to be willing to say yes or no and then make the move and move on. Because think about how quick NBA free agency happens. Like, you've got to know that you're doing this or doing that or going this way, or you might be left out holding the bag and not be able to get anything done to any large degree. So teams have to know if it gets to this point, yes, we'll make the deal with Harden. No, we won't make the deal with Harden. But no team should be starting the conversation with, well, let's max him out to make sure we get him. Like, if you want to arrive at that, I feel like that's still a bad move. But if you want to arrive at that, so be it. But no team should begin a conversation about maxing out James Harden in the offseason.
Hey, if James Harden is using the Rockets to get a 4-year max contract somewhere else, be my guest. I'll feel like Bill Withers. I mean, keep on using us. Go get that max deal somewhere else, because I'm interested in Harden coming back here. I'm not interested in giving Harden the 4-year max contract. Like, that's too many years, and that's too much money for a guy at this stage of his career. So if that's what's going on here and the Rockets are being played, Jake, I'm more in favor of Harden coming back than I think 90% of Rockets fans at this point. I'm okay with him using the Rockets as leverage if another team is willing to give out that contract that I hope the Rockets avoid giving.
Yeah, because then the Rockets don't have to be on the hook for that.
Exactly.
And it's just, It's tough for me to picture any team besides the Rockets that would give Harden the max. Because you also have to remember this. There's only a couple teams with enough money just to straight up sign James Harden without having to do a sign and trade with Philadelphia. So the Rockets are one of those teams where if they just want Harden, they have the cap space just to pay him. They could do it, and they don't have to worry about anything else. Out of the other teams that could do it, like the Spurs, they're not going to sign James Harden. Like that, it's very few teams that I think are truly going to be in on Harden to begin with. And now you're telling me there's teams that are going to give him a max. Maybe Harden is using the Rockets as leverage, and he does want to stay in Philly, and we'll see if he overplayed his hand.
Yeah, look, my guess is, and this has been my guess for a while now, I think James Harden ends up here. I think the only question is how many years and how much. Like, my hope is it's not going to be 4 for $200. My hope is the Rockets can get him, maybe 2 with an option for a third year or something like that. Just something less than what is being talked about right now. But I still feel like, the Rockets with the cap space that they have, the relationship that obviously exists between the Fertittas and James Harden, and just the desperation to win. Desperation makes you do some crazy things, right? Look at what the Texans did on draft day. You can be a fan of it, but they were clearly desperate. They were over-aggressive. They gave up a lot to make that trade to go get Will Anderson. Now, the Rockets are in a similar spot to where they've been the worst team in the sport for the last 3 years. Sometimes that makes you make moves and make deals that other teams might not make, but you do it because you're desperate to turn your franchise around. So ultimately, I think it is the Rockets who are going to make James Harden the best offer. I don't know if it's going to have to be that max contract, because I just don't know if anybody wants to do that.
Quickly, BK, we discussed yesterday the idea of Patrick Beverly ending up in Houston in a team up with James Harden. Are you in or out on that idea?
I'm more in on Patrick Beverly being a Rocket if James Harden is not here. I don't know if I want to run it back with both of those guys. Like, I see some value in having Patrick Beverly here. I mean, obviously he's way cheaper than James Harden, and you're not going to have to give him a 4-year deal. So from a contract perspective and from a being able to build the rest of your roster perspective, Pat Bev makes more sense. I just look, Pat Bev's a pain in the ass. I like rooting for him way more than rooting against him. But say what you will about him, I think he can be a positive influence on the young guys. Obviously, that's been a big topic of conversation about James Harden, right? What type of influence, what type of impact will he have on the young dudes on this team? Pat Bev works his ass off. Like, that guy doesn't take plays off. That guy is locked in during preseason games. It's ridiculous. So, that type of work ethic, I think, can actually be something beneficial to the young Rockets. So, I'd be a little bit worried about bringing both of them in, because you're talking about 2 34-year-old plus players on a team that is still rebuilding. But if Harden ends up going elsewhere and Pat Bev's an option, then, I would sign up for that.